about the different audiences and what they need. And the last thing is, don't ask somebody else to do it for you. It's your creation. It's your work. You can ask for help in doing bits of it, but you have to write it, put it together to make sure you understand what you're doing. Now, many of you will have attended other startup sessions, taken on courses, and the things that I'm talking about now may be familiar to you, but they're worth revisiting because without them, you can't write an effective business plan. You may know that we differentiate startups from existing businesses. We talk about searching for business models, and we have to do that. We have to work out the right way for our target market, for our product, and get it right. Most of us use some variation of a business model tool like the business model canvas or the lean canvas, and ideas like design thinking to put these things together.
Hey, Ken, you're muted again. Can you hear me? Whoever just
Okay, I'm back again, hopefully.
Yep.
Unfortunately, the system keeps putting me on mute. It says there's too many people on the call or something. Anyway,
can you send me your cell phone number?
All right.
So that I can text you when it happens, so it's easier? Would that be easier?
How's that? Can you hear me better that way?
Yeah, we can definitely hear you. I just want to make sure that if it happens, I can text you or get at you quickly.
Yeah. Okay, hang on I'm going to pause for 1 second, everyone. Okay, I'm back again. Cleo, I've emailed you my mobile number if you want to text me.
Perfect, thank you.
All right, firing away then, gang. Basically, I was trying to discuss the difference between business models and business plans. We start off in the design process. We talk about the conceptual ideas. We think about how the business is going to run, whichever version of models we look at. We often prototype and test parts of it, and we validate what we're doing. That's what we set out to do in the Lean Launchpad, Lean Startup, etc. Then the planning stage is we take the design and we do the real work. And this is often the challenge for people that use the Lean Startup, people that use the business model canvas. They trivialize it. They make it simple. They reduce it to a few lines on a bit of paper. The next stage is to take that pretty picture, that one-page picture, and dig into the detail, put substance on it in a way that you can translate that into a working business. And eventually you convert that work, the planning work, not the plan, the planning work, into the business plan. And you convert the work, in essence, as I've said here, and you add the dates, you add the deadlines.
Ken, can you hear me? Oh, man. Oh, man. Sorry, guys. We're just trying to make this work. I feel like when it hits 100, it's problematic. I think you're right.
Sorry about that, folks. The mic keeps turning off on me for no reason. The system's turning me off. I'm back again, hopefully.
Can you hear me, Ken?
So fundamentally, what I was trying to say is that we're focusing a lot on understanding the market, the needs of the customer, and recognizing there is competition. It may not be the identical product or service, but you've got to understand why the competition is there and how.
I'm just going to call him, you guys.
I'm sorry, people. I have no idea why the system keeps turning my microphone off.
Ken, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I'm hoping it's back on again.
Can you hear me? Can I borrow your phone, Tash?
All right. I deeply apologize. I tested all the technology and it worked perfectly when we tried it before. Actually, what I'm going to ask you to do is give me a couple of minutes. I'm seeing these different messages, talking to a phone, whatever else. I have just no idea why the system is choosing to be. So I'm going to stop the presentation for a moment. And speak to Cleo. So ignore me for a couple of minutes.
He's white in the fridge. No, agree. What is going on? Thanks for your patience, guys. I'm so sorry about this. We're just trying to work through it. I don't know what the heck is happening here.
Cleo, can you call me? I am afraid I just do not know why this is not working. And I'm going to have to ask you to give us 5 minutes and see if I can hear from Cleo as to what to do next.
so much.
What are the chances? Can anyone hear me? Hello?
We can hear you, Ken. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Perfect. Okay, I can hear you
Well,
now what I think should happen is we can we start from the beginning, because I know we missed like a lot of stuff. I know, I'm so sorry to ask you to
okay. All right.
and then
Okay, let's see what I can do.
we can still see presentation, right? No slides. Okay, slides aren't up yet. So you know what? Should still so perfect. So Ken, what you should do is still sign in on your computer and put the slides up, and then you'll just talk on the phone to us and move it along with but mute your microphone and then move it along.
Okay, I'm gonna see if this works.
I think it's gonna. There we go. You're presenting.
How's that?
We are good. That's perfect, and we can all hear you. This is great. Everything's good. I'll mute myself and unmute myself if needed to flag you, but this should be perfect. Yes.
Okay, folks, I hope this all works and the battery stays in my mobile phone. I'm not going to go quite all the way back to the beginning, but I'm going to do a very quick précis, just to simply say that my opening comments were that on the one hand, you are being told today that business plans are no longer appropriate, that the new world of lean launchpad and flex and agile and whatever else means that we shouldn't be writing these static, boring plans. This is to an extent true, but it's not totally true, because we can use business plans a number of ways. what is key is that we recognize the purpose of writing a business plan, and that we don't get into the business plan writing activity until we've done the prep work. And in this preparation, I'm covering two areas of prep work. The first is talking about business models, which may be old knowledge for many of you. The second is putting together the financial side of your business, which tends to be very poorly done, and then how we pull this together into our final business plan. So, as I've been suggesting, we tend these days to use tools like the business model canvas and the lean canvas. And we use these to build the design of our business. This is a picture that some of you may have seen. If not, you can look it up and find it. But the key thing here is that for our business, it's the link between the value proposition and our customers. And this is the area that I find that people don't do a good enough job. And when they don't do a good enough job here, they're too vague, they're too casual, they don't think it through, they see it from their own perspective versus the customer's perspective. And as a result, none of the rest of the things that we do work very well. So the business model canvas or equivalent ideas, we have a number of customer-facing things like value proposition, target customers, how we deal with the customers to channel the revenue, and then the background stuff, which is how we build a business that delivers that value proposition, which is the key activities, key resources, and the key partners we might have. And that then drives our cost structure. And without doing this work sort of front to back, we never build a proper understanding of our business. So by using something like the business model canvas or lean canvas, we end up, much of the work we do, if we do it properly, will be a design tool that we can then use to put into our final business plan. But it implies serious investigation, serious design, serious travel. And this customer value proposition, market research, primary and secondary research, really digging and understanding the nature of the market and making sure that you speak with customers. And you speak with customers to get their views and their reactions to your product and ideas, not to push your ideas to them. As we say here, real entrepreneurs do stuff and talk to people. And target markets. Again and again, when I deal with entrepreneurs, they tend to oversize their target market and tend to be too general in what they're looking for. So they'll tell me, my target is young people. It's Gen Zers, it's millennials, very occasionally it's baby boomers or whatever. Those are not target markets. Those are big labels that describe millions, tens of millions, even hundreds of millions of people across the world. How do we get to the detailed, narrow target market is a starting point. Highly specific group of people or organizations, and they share enough common needs that are not well enough met that we can sell to them. So, obviously, you have to define your product or service, and you do it in terms of not just features, but the things that will actually make it attractive to your target market. You've got to demonstrate why they need the target market and really understand who your competition is. Again and again, when I talk to people, they say, no, my idea is new. I don't have any competition. I'm the first. It usually takes me about 5 minutes to find actual competitors to their idea. Not identical, but close enough that they're already serving that target market and have the potential to disrupt the new idea. So that means we have to define them very clearly as people with common needs. More importantly, the capacity and resources to buy. The fact they may like it doesn't mean that they're actually going to use it or buy it. And then finally, not only do they have the money, the capacity, they have to have an interest. And unless you can do all three of these things, you actually don't have customers. And recognize that those customers can be the consumer, we think about most often, but it can be businesses, it can be not-for-profits, it can be institutions of various types and various forms. Obviously, we always push that you present a unique and valuable value proposition. I always say it's the three ways: take away a pain that they're facing, meet a need that's not satisfied, or indeed, if you can, create a new need that they didn't know they had. And I think of Twitter, and I just wonder, Anyhow, in the end, it's something they want for one of those three reasons and they're willing to pay for, or somebody else is willing to pay for them to get it. And you've got to be different. It's got to be features, and it can be cost, but typically being cheaper is not usually a sustainable idea. It's got to be sufficiently different in features that they want to use it and do it. And not only is that true, but it's got to be at a price point that you can make a profit while they buy, which isn't always easy to do. Now, channels, Phil, I'm going to skip these because we have been falling a bit behind, but fundamentally, how do we communicate with these people? How do we sell to them? How do we distribute to them? In depth, in detail, not just very generic statements. Now, so how do they discover a product? How do they make buying decisions? How do we make it easy for them to buy from us? How do we make the purchase easy? How do we handle delivery? How do we handle support? These are all things you have got to discuss as part of your value. And then making money. You can make money by selling things, pretty obviously. You can make money by earning fees, the service fee, the brokerage, the usage fee, the subscription fee. Those are all models you've seen, especially in the digital economy. And we can sometimes lease, rent, or license products and services. And unfortunately, the one that we see too often today in digital products is advertising. It appears to be the easiest way to get out. It's the easiest way to say we're going to, but how much do you understand about the market? If somebody is paying to reach your users, how much are they paying and how do they pay? And this leads me to a very important situation, is understanding the difference between a user and the customer. The very simple and obvious example is Facebook. Most of you are probably on Facebook. You're not customers of Facebook. You're users. In fact, you're product. You are the product that they sell to their real customers, the advertisers. So if you're launching your own business and you're saying, I'm going to provide free something to people and I'm going to make money from advertising, do you understand what it is you're offering the user and what it is you're offering the paying customer, your advertiser, and how will that work? Once you've got those things set out, what is it you actually have to do? And obviously your businesses may be very, very different, but determining things like, will you have production facilities? Are you going to make things yourself? Or are you going to contract out to somebody else? If you're having things made in China at the moment, that might be a little bit of a challenge. Or are you buying a product from somebody else and reselling it? Are you not providing product, but you're solving problems? And are you solving problems for people in business or for consumers? Are you acting as a consultant, a professional service provider? Key understanding of what the actual tasks you have to do and what kind of people have to work for you to make this work. If you're selling, who will sell? How will they sell? Who will take the order? How will you collect the cash? How will they pay? If you're running a restaurant, which is rather tough at the very moment we're having this session, how many staff do you need to handle breakfast, lunch, and dinner? How do you handle the variation in employment? Those are things you've got to think about in terms of the activities. If you're offering platform-type services, is it a physical platform, place that people come, or is it something on the internet? How will it work? Maybe you've already got access to a customer segment. How do you have that access? What do you do to make it work? And finally, when you're looking at your value proposition and you're making money from that value proposition, what is it, the thing that you're trying to do? So I'm just pausing here because my screen is doing something funny. We try again. Does your business succeed because of economies of scale? Do you have to have that hockey stick, that rapid growth in number of customers to make it work? Or is it because you have a knowledge advantage that other people don't have because of your skills, the database you built, whatever else it might be? Or is it because you're intimate with your customers? You've got a different special relationship with customers. What are the things that you've got to make sure your business delivers in its key activities to make this work? Resources. You have to really think deep about all the things you have to do to launch your business. What physical resources do you need? Do you need a manufacturing plant? Do you need a warehouse? Do you need a shop? Do you need just a place that you package things? Can you do it in your basement? Are you allowed to do it in your basement? What physical resources do you need? Do you need delivery trucks, whatever it might be? Do you have intellectual resources, whether it's patents and copyrights, rare but possible, or is it valuable knowledge, or is it particular contracts that give you an advantage in the marketplace? Those are things that are important. What about your human resources? Obviously you, but more importantly, your key people. And I'll come back and talk a bit more about that when we look at the business plan later. And last of all, obviously financial. Do you have access to unusual cash, unusual sources of funds, whatever else? Partnerships. Who do you work with? Have you suppliers that you need a special relationship with? Have you got customers? Because customers can actually be partners too. If you're selling a product through wholesalers and through retailers to end users, those intermediates are also your partners. Do you work with complementers where you sell in parallel with somebody else? Recognize that a key partner is somebody that knows who you are as well as you know who they are. And you tend to have very few of these, if at all. Okay, I've gone fairly fast through that because we have been rather disrupted and it may have been stuff you knew already. So I'm now going to move on to talk about the financial plan, which is one of the things that people tend to approach with a great deal of caution and often a great deal of fear. First of all, I'm going to start with one of my favorite diagrams. This is one I've been using since the 1980s, and it illustrates the classic challenge we have at every startup. On the left-hand side, we have cost. Across the middle, you'll see the break-even line. When we launch something, we have some initial, not too big costs when we do the planning and initial ideas. And then we launch the business. And we spend a lot more money. And you'll see how that line, the cumulative cost, goes down and down and down. We sometimes call this digging the ditch because we're digging ourselves into significant debt or digging away at our capital. Eventually, we hope, at true startup, something good happens. But there are three possibilities. The first is the lowest line you can see here. But in the end, you never make any money. Your costs always exceed your revenue, and you end up by failing. And we have quite a few famous internet businesses that face that situation right now. You might look at the financials of Spotify, for example, and wonder where they're going to go in the future. Or you may make some profits. You'll see the middle line there, heading back up, small profits. Still a loss maker, but you're making some cash. And finally, the optimism, the good profit success line that rockets up high. Recognize that you have to reach that break-even point that you've actually got back the money you spent to be a successful business. And this isn't easy. The faster you can get to revenue, the more likely your business is to succeed. And you have to do the financial work to recognize what those numbers are. So how do we develop the financials? Frankly, when you make a pitch or somebody reads your business plan, they care about you, they care about your idea. After that, it's the numbers they want to look at. They want to understand that your financials make sense. What you've got to do in putting your financials together is make assumptions, test those assumptions, validate things, make sure you really think about every element of your business model translated into accounting, dollars and time. You may sometimes do multiple scenarios. And I'm going to pause right now for a moment and tell you an anecdote. Back in 2008, in a startup or a turnaround I was involved in, we were looking at buying a business out of bankruptcy and turning it around. And then we needed to get 500 plus investors to support this idea. When we developed the business plan, we had what we called the most likely scenario, the most optimistic scenario, and the most pessimistic scenario. With that, we got A, the support of the various investors, B, we got a lender to loan us quite a few $1 million. By the time we'd done that, it was December 2008. For those that can't remember that far back, that was the point that the last recession hit rather badly. However, because our worst case scenario was actually better than we did even during that recession time, we had the support of our lenders, the support of our investors, and the business has now become very successful. highly topical given what is happening right now in the economy, thanks to the virus that we're all dealing with right now as we get into this session. Really hard, nitty-gritty stuff. And people sometimes turn away because they find it difficult. This is where you have to do the real work to discover your business, what your business really needs in terms of dollars and time. So how do we put this together? We start off by listing the key activities that we're going to take place. We identify the key assets that we're going to acquire. And by the way, this is one part you can use others' ideas. Depending on your industry, you can find useful templates. You can find industry standards. I've worked with 2 or 3 organizations and individuals who have developed either breweries or distilleries. There is an organization, for example, for microbreweries, where you can actually go to their websites and actually get production information, asset information, financial planning information that would actually help put together a typical set of templates for that particular business. We always start with sales. We start with sales, we think of sales, cost of sales, and we always start with the unit sales, whatever we're selling, not dollar sales. This is a classic error that people make. If you work in dollars only, then we don't actually understand what we're doing. It doesn't matter whether I sell you a physical product or a service. I'm selling you a unit of sale, and that unit of sale could be $1, $100, $1,000 for the single unit, $1 million. But we separate the unit from the dollar value. As I said before, make assumptions very clear, and we dig into these assumptions. We look for sources to make them reasonable. We always allow a bit extra. It never is as cheap, as fast, as easy as we thought it would be. You will be building spreadsheets. One of the classic errors is to cut and paste from one spreadsheet to another. You build one set of financial spreadsheets. Ideally, the first page will have all the key assumptions, all the key numbers you have. So if, for example, you've got an interest rate, an inflation rate, whatever else, then, excuse me, I'm getting some feedback for the moment. I'm just going to try and reduce this noise. That what you try and do is make sure that you say on one front page, you have to say, for example, here's the interest rate, here's the labor rate, here's the unit price, etc., so that every other part of the spreadsheet always takes its original numbers from that first page. That means that if you do make a change, then you can make one change and know it will be reflected all the way through. I've seen so many disasters when people have tried to cut and paste between spreadsheets and something goes wrong. I'm going to skip this part. So the financial plan then, understand that a business plan is a concept till you have numbers that support it. It's kind of funny, we say they're always wrong, but you need to do them. Because if you don't have them, you don't have any idea of the possibilities and range. Also recognize these are not accounting statements, they're not financial statements. They're projections, they're pro formas, they're possibilities. And you're doing these, yes, for potential investors, but you're also doing them for you, because you've got to understand the financial implications of your business. So, what do? We start off with those sales estimates based on units. From those sales estimates, as I said in units, we can then talk about the dollars that relate to those unit sales. Those two things, the units to the dollars, then drive the income statement that we have to prepare, or the pro forma income statement for our business. We then take the assets that we've identified as needed, we play with those, we put together the initial ideas. Some of those feed the income statement, and others, along with the income statement, feed the cash flow. And although I put it up here last, that's actually the most important part of the whole thing. And then to support these things, we have a whole bunch of schedules. And we could have only 1 or 2 for a little business. There could be 50 pages or more for other businesses. So for example, if you remember I mentioned the restaurant that might have shifts, there's the shift schedule. How many people are working on each shift at what time? How do you handle vacations? All those things appear. What assets do you buy? What depreciation rates are you using? All these go in the supporting schedules. Let's come back to estimating sales. Sales forecasts, always a challenge. The basics are, you start off with, what are my products? What are my services? What unit prices? Now, recognize in your initial financials, you don't necessarily have to, if you're selling 1,000 items in a retail store, you don't have to estimate the sales of every one. You group them into product groups and say, I've got one kind of group, another kind of group, and then you use approximate prices for each of these and tie them into sales. And you bring in the cost, and as I said before, you may have multiple sales scenarios, the optimistic, the pessimistic, and so on. You obviously do these over multiple years, and we have to make some predictions. Now, often we can use historic data from other businesses, other markets, and compare. Very seldom do we have to create from nothing. We have to think detail, and this can tie into the market research you do, the consumers you talk to, your estimates of market size, your estimates of market penetration, all done in detail so you understand what's going on. Try to be as realistic as possible. But you're still making assumptions. And you're saying, what are the key variables that I'm making the assumptions about? And whenever possible, comes back to understand your customer, talk to your customer, do your research, do your competitive analysis, understand what you're doing. Okay, so bringing this together, start with your basic assumptions and concepts, the pricing assumptions you've made, the unit sales, and then you start to say, what are my costs of making and selling the goods or providing the services? What are my direct costs? What are my indirect costs? And if you're in manufacturing, you have to do some thinking about capacity levels that we have to have. What are my key activities that I'm going to have to deliver those goods and services to make them? What are my key facilities to do that? And anything else I might have as likely costs, all the way down to your stationery costs, your insurance costs, everything else. You put together your first draft spreadsheets. And initially, the only two things you worry about are your income statement and your cash flow. When you put these together with all the assumptions you played around with and not quite complete, typically what happens then is you scream. Ironically, in most cases, when people do this, they discover they're losing so much money, it doesn't make sense. And they know they've got to go back and reassess their assumptions, the things they're doing, and remodel. If, on the other hand, you discover you're going to make an amazing amount of money, way more than anyone else might do in your industry, you still should scream, because it just means you've missed out a bunch of costs that you need to look at. So you do this several times till you know what you're up to. Now, a couple of things you've got to think about in putting these together. It may take you 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to get your business to the point you're ready to launch. But once you've launched, you don't hit your sales right away. What time lag, how long does it take from the time you start marketing to the time you start selling, and how will it ramp up? So quite typically, it might be 3 or 4 months after you launch before you start to find any uptake in the market. That's got to be reflected in your financials. Also recognize that revenue is not necessarily the same as sales. I used to be a management consultant. What we sold, in essence, were hours of work. If I sold your company a consulting project, let's say I was going to sell you 100 hours a month for 3 hours. I'm making the sale today. I do the work over the next 3 months. But when are you going to pay me? I probably won't invoice you till the end of the first month. You might not pay me till the end of the second month. So even though I've sold 3 months of consulting, it will be 3 to 4 months before I get the revenue, the cash from that sale. What does that do to the operating of my business? We've also got to take into account seasonality. Pretty obviously, if you're selling ice cream, you have a peak season and a quiet season. One of the businesses I'm still involved in running and it is a hotel. You can imagine, I'm on the board of a major hotel. You can imagine the challenges we're facing right now in terms of occupancy. One of the things that we do is we host weddings. Weddings are very seasonal and very cyclical. Therefore, when you're planning it, almost nobody gets married in December and January. People get married in the spring, the summer, a little bit in the fall. So you have to plan the ups and downs of your business to recognize that. You're always looking to say, at what point will I break even? When will I bring in enough cash that I'm actually covering the costs of my day-to-day costs? And, well, this slide has been around for years, but right now, the most significant thing impacting businesses all across the world are external factors. Both the direct impact of the virus pandemic, but also the impact of all the government policies that are being implemented right now and what these are. So, we put together our income statement. Revenue estimates. So we start off with those sales revenue estimates. We then think about the variable costs that tie in, the cost of goods, if you like, that tie in directly with making sales. So if I don't make a sale, I don't incur the cost. Then I think about my fixed costs. Even if I have a store, even if nobody walks into the store, I still have fixed costs. If I run a coffee shop, well, my variable costs are the coffee, the milk, etc. Well, my fixed costs are the coffee machines, the counters, the tables, the chairs, etc. that I need to have. Make sure you understand those and their implications. Understand what that means in terms of gross margin, net margin, profit, whatever you want to call those things. And recognize this rather simple picture that shows that, initially we lose a lot of money. And after a few months, we start to make a bit of money. We have to plan for that. I've talked about these things already, so I'm going to skip really quickly. But actually, what we have to worry about most in a business isn't profit. It's about cash flow. What cash do I need to get the business up and running? And I need to separate the capital, the stuff I need to invest at the beginning before I've done anything. And that could include little more, perhaps, than setting up a store or bringing in inventory. But if your business is, say, a software-based business, I might have 6 months, 9 months of application development I've got to pay for before I launch the business. So you have to recognize the front-end cash needs, and people tend to underestimate these, especially when you remember the time lags I mentioned before. As I said, payment tends to be delayed. I sell today, I may get paid next month or 2 months from now. The ideal situation is when I get paid in advance and then I deliver the good or service. Also, we have to allow for bad debt. Some people won't pay us. Also recognize, if you understand that when we look at cash flow, that if we've already spent money, even if we're not treating it as an expense, so we depreciate a physical asset, once we've paid for it, it's not cash anymore, and it doesn't affect us. And obviously, you're borrowing money, interest costs versus capital repayments. I'm just skip that. Recognize that the key message in every business is cash is king. It's not about profit. It's not about sales. It's about cash. And ironically, you can actually have a successful business that is having great sales, great performance, and go out of business because you've run out of cash. It happens a lot, amazingly. So always think cash first and profit second. Now, the balance sheet. Income statement is your day-to-day operations analysis. Sorry. So to pause for a second. Okay, I'm back with you again. So balance sheets. You need balance sheets for the startup. That is what we often talk about, sort of year zero. The moment you start your business, you've already invested. I'm going to pause because yet again, I'm getting a signal that I'm pausing because I'm getting a signal that I can't be heard again. I'm going to check on that, then return to you.
Is that you, Ken?
Hello?
Yeah, there you're back. Perfect.
Okay. Was it running okay? Did you lose sound?
No, everything's good. We lost you for a minute, but I can hear you again now. We're good to go. And also, just a side note, I have a document with questions that I'm keeping, so I'll email it to you when you're done, and then you can answer those questions, okay?
Okay, fair enough. All right, so you can now see the balance sheet slide?
Yes, yeah, we can.
Yes.
Okay, so I've got a slide that said, basically, what I was saying was that that your balance sheet start on what we often talk about year or month zero. What is it you've already invested in before you actually start the business? And sometimes this could be almost nothing, just a few hundred, a few $1,000s you've spent, or it could be 6-9 months of work. For example, if you've been writing software or building prototype products or whatever else. So we have a balance sheet for the startup, and then this is normally just an annual activity. So you say year 0, the end of year 1, the end of year 2, the end of year 3, etc. We build this fundamentally from our income statement and cash flow activities. What assets did we acquire? How does the cash flow in and out, etc., etc. Plus the other things that we have to look at, that we depreciate, the loans that we get, etc. I'd mentioned the need for supporting schedules, obviously sales forecasts, staff work schedules, wage schedules, loan payment schedules, capital asset schedules with depreciation, and more and more and more, whatever is relevant to your business. Obviously, you've got the idea, be detailed. Typically, we look at the first year, monthly for sales forecast, income statement, cash flow. Annually, the balance sheets and the overall schedules. For subsequent years, 2 and 3, either monthly again for sales, income, and cash flow, maybe quarterly if year 1 was a significant year in terms of revenue. But usually, at least years 1 and 2, you need to do this on a monthly basis, and maybe more than that. And then if you are going 4 years or more in your projections, you tend to drop to an annual forecast. So what I've been indicating is that once you know about your product and your business model, you flesh out this complete set of pro forma financials and explain that if you've finished it, then you understand at least the basics of your cost drivers, your business drivers, and the implications of your customers and what they do. A couple more details. Assumptions need to be explicit and clearly explained. This is as much for you as for anyone else. If somebody says to you, well, you said insurance would be so-and-so, how do you know? Do you have a proposal? Do you actually know what the cost will be? Etc., etc. This is fairly obvious. Identify things. Sometimes you may have to have separate sales for different types of customer, whatever else. Sometimes your costs you can't work out in detail, and instead you might use typical industry averages for costs. This is often done in food service type businesses. Whatever you put together, the spreadsheet, it should reflect the nature of the business model that you have. Okay, so summing up what I've been trying to say in financials, try and find a template and by template I don't mean necessarily fill in the blanks, but frameworks that people have developed for your kind of business. Recognize that the general ratios, the general proportions tend to be the same for different businesses. If you've got a restaurant, it will have the same kind of margins as other restaurants. You can't typically very much break the general model unless you've got a totally different delivery model that you're using. I mentioned the spreadsheets. Make sure, I said they're all linked, and make sure you check your totals in multiple directions. That is really important. You have to be honest to yourself, and you have to be conservative. Don't be optimistic with financials. And I probably said this 6 times already, properly justified assumptions. And the good old keep it simple, stupid version approach. Don't make it overly complex if you don't have to. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second just to catch my breath and then we drink. And then I'm going to talk about writing the plan. The actual, if we've done the previous work, so we've developed a good business model, we understand the customer relationships, we understand the value proposition, we've worked out what the assets are that we require, we've worked out the activities and processes that we need to plan, develop, launch, and run the business. We then translated those into financials that make sense. If we've done all that, then we're ready to write the plan. I'm pausing again just for a moment. Just to validate, Cleo, text me if you can still hear me. I'm going to carry on, assuming that you can. The business plan itself.
We can still hear you.
Good. Excellent. So, if you've done everything else I've talked about, this should be the simplest thing. Easy to say, tough to do. But the issue here is now the style, the approach, and clarity, clear presentation of content. It's not just write another essay. There are so many reference sources available. They're all adequate. None are great. I'm going to cover the key elements that go above and beyond what all the books are that you will provide. So let's look at that business plan. Why are we writing the plan? You start off by asking yourself, why am I writing this business plan? Am I writing it to plan the launch of my business? That is, I have no revenue, or the growth of my business. I've actually done my pilot work. I've got my first wave of customers. I've developed and tested a minimum viable product. Now I'm growing. So which is it that I'm doing? Am I actually doing it to raise financing? And if so, to whom am I presenting it? The kind of information, the kind of thing you would say to a bank, for example, is quite different from what you would do to an angel if you've had that opportunity to present to an angel. Is it mainly for yourself? That is clarity of thought. Are you doing it to make sure you understand yourself, all the details of your business? Is it for others in the business? Is it for you, the owner? Is it for managers that may work for you? Your employees? Or in some cases, it could even be a report to the board if you're actually working with a variety of advisors. So the purpose is to do these different things, and it sort of focuses, I sort of said here that, some of the classics. Is it the bank of mum and dad, or that relative, Aunt Mary, whoever is funding you? Is it these arm's length lenders like grant provider, government grants, government loans, bank loans, private lenders, which is a kind of halfway stage towards an angel, and then the true investment community, the angels, the VCs, and the dream of the IPO, which is only for in total, only about 2% of all startups or less. So, coming back then, between that, who's the audience? Well, I think I've covered most of those things already. Recognize this is Ken's version of how you put this together. We've got the very beginning, the idea, develop the product, patents, business model, research, etc. We've got the actual startup where we validate the business model, minimum viable product, assuming the market kicks in and does start to buy, our growth, refine our marketing, expand our staff, routinize operations, and eventually we expand and who knows, even get IPOs. And recognize that we might write business plans at any stage in this process, but recognize they're quite different audiences, because obviously at the very beginning, we tend to fund with our own money, the bank of mum and dad, personal credit sources, even credit cards. Government, early stages, they tend to want formal business plans. Angel investors tend to come in a little bit later and definitely want to see much more rigorous presentation of what you've done. But they want results. VCs, if you ever get the chance to talk to them, much later again in the cycle and what they do. And that's just a few more things there. And we'll dream about the IPO. So the plan itself, what does it look like? It has obviously a title page. It has an executive summary. It then has a table of contents, and it's in that sequence. Then the detailed plan has several chapters. These are just possibilities, but typically a description of the business, a discussion on the market and industry you're operating in, a discussion of the business strategy, which includes the sales strategy, the marketing strategy, the operations strategy for your business, then the financial projections that tie together all those previous sections. Finally, the launch plan, or the growth plan, how do you intend to hit the business? And then it's supported by appendices. And these can be massive, they can be long, they can be short, they can be different. So obviously you draw from your business canvas, you draw from your early cut financials. There's no magic there, although I've given you one, but one that fits your business idea. You use the way, look, don't copy other plans, but look at how other plans, if you get a chance, how they presented particular ideas and situations. Recognize, to cite the fact I'm a professor, business plans don't use academic models. They don't use citations. You don't need to cite sources unless the source is important. So if you say, the consulting firm McKinsey found that X, Y, and Z, if you say this particular authority, that's okay. But otherwise, you don't need sources unless it's there for a reason. So the title page, let's look at each of the pages. It needs to be professional but simple. Fancy pictures sell you nothing. So simple pictures, simple logos can work. But actually what's most important is it does have a title about your business. There's the name of your company in it. It is the names of the key players. If it's your business, your name should be on the front page. It should have contact information. It is ironic how many times I see people who have a business plan and they don't actually put their name and their contact information, address, email, etc., on the front page. There may well have been a covering letter included with it, but you'd be surprised how often the covering letter gets detached from the plan. Make sure that no matter whose hands this plan gets into, they know whose plan it is. And obviously, I say you write it individually. If this business plan was written for the TD Bank, say so on the front page. If it was written for Ken Grant, angel investor, say so on the front page. So simple, clean, informative. The executive summary. This is the most important part of the plan. It has to explain the idea. It has to say how it will make money. It has to include the ask if you're looking for money. How much are you asking for? From whom? And how long do you want it for? And it has to say why this is a good investment. Not just for your investors, but for you. Why is this mutually beneficial? This whole story has to be there. And of course, it should say, why you? Why are you essential for this to work? And at the end, it should say, what are you going to do? So if you're looking for funding, you would say, we will follow up to ask X, Y, and Z, or we are asking you for, whatever it might be. Next steps, you can have it. Typically, our target is 1 page. Occasionally, it can go to 2, but never more than 2. Obviously, it's vital. Focus only on key issues. It is not, the name is actually misleading. It is not a summary. It's the key highlights of your business plan. So key issues, don't hide anything. Don't waste words. No bullshit. Don't use 3 words if 1 word will do. Be direct. And always edit down and make sure the message and the ask is clear. Table of contents, it should be to 2 or 3 levels, have chapter headings, section headings, etc. And a minor thing, but if you have a number of appendices, each one of those should be labeled. It shouldn't just say Appendix A, it should say Appendix A, work schedule, Appendix B, assets to be acquired for my restaurant, etc., etc., etc. So down to 3 levels, and it needs page numbers. The business description. What is the product? What is the service? What needs does it satisfy? What is its value proposition? What about your business? Do you describe who the owners are, the key staff if they are there? What is the org structure? Is there a supply chain that's important? Is there history? Because this may be a true startup, or it may be stage 2, stage 3, whatever. Make sure they understand what stage your business is at. Talk about the distinctive competences of your business and why this is a great business. Mention the legal structure. Is it an incorporated company? Is it a partnership? And sometimes this may show stages of growth, depending on the nature of your business. I'm launching 1 restaurant, and then 2 or 3, and then I'm going to franchise, whatever it might be. That might be relevant to your plan. Then we talk about the market. What is my target market? Very specific. The customer characteristics, the demographics related to those customers. What are the trends in that marketplace, and why is it important? Obviously, are you Taking away the pain, meeting a need, creating a need. An overview of the industry in which you will compete. Excuse me, cough. Make sure you discuss competitors, where they sit in the market, how well are they doing, how successful are they. You may need to discuss wider industry trends. You may need to discuss legal and regulatory issues if they're relevant to your kind of business. Again, be specific, include good numbers. Suddenly I've developed a cough. The business strategy. Excuse me, I'm going to have to pause and get a glass of water. Sorry. I had to get a bottle of water. So, talking about the business strategy. Oh, can you hear me talking about the business strategy?
Everything's great. Yep.
Great. Okay, good. Open up with, what are the challenges you're getting in there? Why are you different? What's your special situation that you have? Quick description of the products and services tied into the value proposition, the key features, the differentiators, the challenges you face to make this work. What your marketing and sales strategy are. Sometimes these can be pulled out into separate chapters, sometimes just into one, depending on the complexity of your business. Segment marketing, that is the campaigns, the positioning, etc., from the selling. How will you handle each of those things? This is where you introduce at a high level some of your projections, and it may be supported by an appendix that would have several years of detail in what you're looking at underneath. Then it will discuss your operational strategy. How will you handle sales? Because sales is operations. How will you handle manufacturing and supply chain if you have one? Or running a data center, whatever else you might need to do. How will you handle customer service? How will you handle returns? How will you handle whatever you need to do to carry out the activities that make your business different? Each of those has to be discussed to some degree in this chapter, or as I say, you could break it into 2-3 chapters if the business is big and complex enough. Again, be specific, but recognize you can always put a lot of detail in appendices. You don't need to put it all up front. You can summarize it here and put it in an appendix. As I said, it could become 2 or 3 chapters. Marketing plan might include, I don't know if you're familiar, but you can draw on, but don't call them these things, the 4 Ps, the 7 Ps. They include strategic and quantitative targets, units again and dollars, the pricing and promotion strategies you're going to follow, the marketing campaigns you intend to launch, your initial tactical sales campaign, the timing of those things, the budget of those things are all kind of things that you would talk about in your marketing plan. Then we've talked about financial projections, and I've given you all this already. This is what we now do is we present in 2 or 3 pages all that detailed work. Almost certainly, these will be supported by detailed appendices. So if, for example, you're presenting income statements for, say, the first 3 years, those should all be in 1 page in the main plan. There might be detailed information on those, much more expanded ones, in appendices. You may have balance sheets, but again, you can summarize the balance sheet for the year 0 and the first 3 years of a business all in 1 table. Doesn't have to be long, although it does have to be readable. Same with cash flow. Your supporting schedules will all be in appendices. So again, only 2 or 3 pages, make them count, have nice, appropriate tables and pictures that make sense. You may include important metrics. Talk about key benchmarks, key ideas. What will your performance look like? For example, I mentioned that I'm on the board of a hotel. One of the key measures for a hotel is something called RevPAR, revenue per available room. I would expect in looking at anyone's plan for a boutique hotel to discuss how these financials produce certain levels of RevPAR. If I don't see that, I know they don't understand their business. And when I see that number, I can then look at those metrics and say, how do they compare to my understanding of that industry in general? Why are they different? Have they explained why they're different? For example, and we're right in the middle of this massive crisis where occupancy is crashing in hotels right now, and I'm in board meetings and every 2 or 3 days discussing this. My particular hotel has higher occupancy, significantly higher room occupancy than our other competitors in the same area. It's part of our business model. If I was going to borrow money for my hotel, I would have to explain to the investor why this particular ratio is higher than my main competitors and use that to help justify my overall business performance. Again, key assumptions. Yeah, I keep coming back to that one. Recognize that this is where we talk about funding requirements. This is where we talk about the timing. Don't forget, you may say, I want $100,000, $200,000 of investment, but you don't necessarily want it all at the beginning. You might say, I want $50,000 now, $50,000 in 3 months. Makes a difference to, and I will demonstrate some results before I get it. Make sure you understand. You don't ask for too much too soon. Present your break-even point and talk about the returns. The financials must conclude with an assessment of the, in essence, the balance sheet performance, why your business will make money, why it will create return, what will that return look like to the investor that you're asking to provide a loan, whatever. And you may include risk analysis. You may include some of the stuff you say, here's my optimistic case, my pessimistic case. Again, very briefly. We have to be specific, clear assumptions, and as I say, appendices are where most of the detail are. Now we come to the launch plan. And we're getting there, folks, not too much longer. The launch plan will talk about the current status of the business. You may actually have been, maybe you've been running the business on your own for the last year or 2 years, but now you're ramping it up. If so, say so. Make sure the reader clearly understands at this moment in time what stage your business is at. And then we start talking about the steps to launch the business or launch the next stage of the business or whatever else. One of those key steps. This would be shown as a timeline, and it may be tied into the resources needed that you have to make it work. Ideally, you would show a few key milestones. These are the things that really count in assessing the success of your business and the timing. As I indicated earlier, depending on your, whether you call it your optimism or the stage of your business, you may show several stages. Stage 1, launch 1 business. Stage 2, grow to 3 or 4 more businesses. Stage 3, franchise, whatever else it might be. You may not have detail of the second, third stage, but if they're relevant to where you're going, you might include it here. In essence, what you are telling the investor is, how do you spend the money that they're going to give you? And you're demonstrating that you know what you're doing. Appendices, there's just some lists. You can see there's a list there. It could be your resumes, it could be the org chart, it could be photographs and images of the facilities you're going to use, the detailed financials, maybe additional research. This is where you can add a lot more detail. They may not look at it, but you've demonstrated you've done the work. You may not always give it to them, but you have it available. And if there are important documents, if you have got a patent pending, if you have got a copyright, if you've got an agreement to be the Canadian agent for Company X or Company Y, these should be in the appendices. And by the way, in almost every case, you will be asking people you give your business plan to sign some form of non-disclosure. You include that non-disclosure in the document, and you make sure they sign that before. And recognize these, because they're so varied, they can have all kinds of different formats. You don't need to look at the same as the rest of the quote. Okay, so wrap up. Question I always get asked: how long should it be, Ken? And I'm afraid here's my rather weaselly answer. It's got to be long enough to tell the story, but not long enough to bore the reader. Ironically, a well-told story can be longer. But you've got to make sure you get enough detail in and you make it easy to read. It's not about number of pages. It's not about number of words. I should be able to take your business plan and flip through it. In fact, what I will typically do when I get somebody's business plan, I will quickly read the executive summary. I will almost certainly then flip straight through to the financials and the launch plan, and then I may focus on the rest. But I should be able in 5 or 10 minutes to get a clear understanding of what the business is, the scheme for, and then decide if I want to dig. One interesting thing is to ask your target audience. So if you're talking to a government organization, a bank, friendly angel, and they say, I need a business plan, say, well, how long would you like it to be? What are the key things you want me to ask it to tell you? Okay, if it's a very good idea to ask your target audience, I'm going to skip this actually, except to say that ideally, what I mean by pyramid principles is the whole concept I should really have a separate lecture. What I'm actually pushing is that always try to shorten the body of the business plan and push things to the appendices and summarize them in the body of the report. When we look at real examples, most are between 10 and 25 pages, ignoring appendices, which seem to be as long as you like. So it's a pretty broad range. But I've seen ones that are only 3 or 4 pages. I've seen 200. So it does depend quite a bit on the target audience and the purpose of the business. A few writing tips. Write for your reader, not for yourself. Think about who it is. If it's an individual, think about them as individuals. Don't write long paragraphs. No page should have less, frankly, than 3 or 4 paragraphs. There should be bullet points. Ideally, there should be pictures. Always make use of headings and subheadings. If I ever see more than a page without a heading or subheading, I'm lost. Don't use superlatives, the best, the greatest, unless they're real. Pictures are always good, but they've got to be informative pictures. And obviously, bullet points are good when appropriate because they're much easier to read. And the key thing always is don't hide the key stuff. If you're asking me for an investment, make sure the executive summary tells me what the investment is you're asking for. Don't make me dig to find the detail. Make sure it's easy for me to spot what's important to me. Now, just as an example of writing, and this is just, imagine that I'm planning to launch a microbrewery. This would be a typical example of what you might see in somebody's business plan. So you can see the management team is Louise, Michael, and Antoine. And you can see all the lovely stuff about these people and what they've done and how they do it. Nothing wrong with that. But I would suggest that this is rather better. Our team, not the management team, pretty pictures, right underneath the picture, what the key characteristics are of those individuals, and then a friendlier narrative down below that talks about Hello? Am I back?
Yep, we can hear you again.
Great. Hey, I'm just at the end, but sorry about that. That's just the phone disconnected. So what I was trying to say, just to show you a simple example of how you make a thing a bit more readable, is I presented these two different ways to present the same thing. The first is a basic and ordinary management team listing, nothing wrong with it. The second one, though, adds the pictures, the very simple understanding, and you'll read the narrative below and you'll see it's much friendlier. The one on the right is the style you should try and adopt whenever possible, rather than the equivalent on the left. So you'll be getting the session there. These are just some examples of this, things you may know already, where to look at business model canvas, some examples. There is no good book. There's lots of ordinary books. These are half a dozen reasonable books that are out there that talk about writing business plans. Any one of them will give you the basics. There's just some pretty examples of the pretty pictures. I just did have to laugh at the fact that the Dummies one, carefully written title, Business Plans for Canadians for Dummies, not Canadian Dummies. But nevertheless, all pretty good books that you can draw from and understand. So, summarizing, what are you going to do in your business plan? You have to demonstrate that you understand your market. You've identified your target segments. You know what your customer needs are. You have a great value proposition for them. You can develop, make, deliver the product or service in an effective and appropriate way, and the numbers make sense. So, one of my favorite comments about it is that even though the plan is important, good old Da Vinci says, I've been impressed with the urgency of doing. Knowing isn't enough. Applying, do. If it's good enough for Da Vinci, it's good enough for us. I am so sorry for the technical disruptions, and I hope you've still been able to get something out of this in a way that makes sense. So I'm going to stop presenting here and turn it over to Cleo and ask what we're going to do next.
Oh, Ken, thank you so much. Can everybody hear me? Just everybody in the chat, just put a little yes if you can hear me as well. Yep. Okay, perfect. They can all hear. So, and Ken, you're good. You can, yeah?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So thanks for this, and thanks everybody for being so patient. I know we were having some technical difficulties tonight. I'm hoping tomorrow will be a little smoother. We're going to do a dry run. What I'm going to do tomorrow is actually have a backup ready just in case. But in the meantime, Ken, I've texted you the questions to your cell phone that some of the group have had. So I had them fill out questions on a Google Doc, just like based on everything. And then if anybody else has additional questions, you guys can go ahead and throw them in the Google Doc. I'll drop the link back in there, and then I'll text them to you as they come in.
Okay.
And then just to find out, so I'll give you a chance to gather yourself, Ken. And for everybody asking, this session was recorded. So it will take me a couple of days to get it up, but I'm putting them on YouTube. So everything's on our website. You guys go to ryersonstartupschool.com. Everything's on there. Every link to our Twitter, YouTube, past sessions. The slides will be up there as well. Everything you guys want moving forward, you'll find there. So thanks for being patient. And yeah, so the event tomorrow is Startup Social Media with Brent Sterling. And I think it's going to be huge. We've got like 300 people registered for that. So we might have to move this to a different platform if it's going to give us trouble, but we'll see. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Ken, and you can answer the questions that I texted you.
Okay. So, well, the first one somebody said, is there software you can recommend for financial forecasting the business plan that would enable updating numbers efficiently? The honest answer to this for almost every business is no. The reason is that if you use somebody else's package, you don't actually know how the numbers are being created. They're not your numbers, you're plugging numbers in somewhere else. The kind of financials you need for a typical launch are actually quite simple. And it's more important that you build your own understanding. This is not something that I believe you should look for something to make it easy for you. You should build and make your errors and understand how to make it work. I have very seldom have I actually used any pre-packaged software to build my financials. And the reason is they tend to force you into methods of thinking that may not be relevant for your business. On the other hand, I've built or helped people build literally hundreds of simple spreadsheets that make it work. So here's my first answer. Second one that somebody asked was, do you recommend meeting with virtually at this time prospects to ask questions? Best way to approach them? Well, this is a pretty general question. The answer is yes. I mean, we emphasize that. Now, the question used the word prospects here. We're not actually, this implies that prospects are people you contact, you want to turn them into customers. What we're actually trying to do is to talk to the people that we believe will be customers, that we're using them to test our business model ideas or product ideas, whatever else. So yes, you must ask them. You show it to people, but you don't always have to ask the end customer, especially in the early stages. You can also ask industry experts. You can ask other people. I'm not sure if the particular student that is on the call or not, one of the students is working with me in one of my classes. They're interested in, let's just call it a business related to social media. And we were talking about arranging interviews with other social media gurus, people who actually have made a success in that area. So sometimes you learn ideas actually from your competitors, and it's amazing how often you can actually get from them. So yes, you have to talk to people. They can be actual target customers. They can be people that know the market and the people. They can actually even sometimes be competitors. But absolutely, until you've gone to the market, you've gone to the real world and said, this is what I plan to do, you don't have a business. You just have a concept. The last one I see here is, what are some noteworthy sources for patent design for your products or service? Is it recommended, although you may be already a year into your business? I'm not sure of what the question meant by patent design, but if the question is, should you be getting patent protection for your idea? The answer is yes, but it costs money and it takes time. It can take several months to a year or more to get to the patent pending situation. It tends to, and I'm not an expert in this, we have other sessions, but you can't protect in every country. But I have clients and others who have got some expert advice. This is quite good advice online on how to do this as basically as possible. But if you've got an intellectual property that is valuable and worth protecting, absolutely, you should be going ahead to protect it. And don't forget, in many of your cases, it's not actually the patent you're talking about. You're talking about either copyright protection or trademark protection, both of which are perfectly valid and much easier to do. That's all the questions I've seen so far. Were there any other questions? So were there any other questions?
What was that, Ken?
I was just saying, first of all, did you hear my answers to the questions?
Oh yeah, we got everything, definitely.
Okay, so I was just saying, is that all we have in terms of questions?
Yeah, those were the only questions that we had. Let me just double check that I have. Oh, I have two more that I'm going to text you right now. 1 second. There you go. There's two more. Sorry.
Okay. Somebody says, I've read online to refrain from asking investors to sign an NDA when presenting your business plan. What are your thoughts on this? Wow. I would not, I can't think of any reason why a legitimate investor would not be willing to sign a non-disclosure agreement. I have no idea why that would be a good idea. To me, it's appropriate professional practice. And if somebody says, we're not willing to sign it, I would start off by saying to them, can you give me a reason why you're not? Because to me, it's fairly normal business behavior. Somebody else said, where do you recommend collecting accurate market data when developing your business plan? Wow. I think I'd need to know what your business idea is first. The answer is there are lots of market data out there when you dig. The issue is not necessarily so much overall market data as segmenting it down to the particular target customers and geographic areas that you want. But I've sold. It's just hard work. But there's no single source because so many different businesses. Somebody else says, how should one approach legal challenges? Again, I'm not sure which legal challenges you mean. You need to have, you need to have appropriate employee agreements. You need to have appropriate partnership agreements if there's more than one of you in a business. You need to have appropriate supplier agreements. If you're acting as an agent, if you're reselling somebody else's product, you need to have, if somebody's manufacturing for you, you need to have perhaps confidentiality agreements, whatever else. So, but the answer is, you will depending on the nature of your business, you will need various forms of legal protection. Don't forget, in addition to legal protection, you want insurance protection. So you need to think about things like business disruption insurance, perhaps. You need to think about, third-party liability insurance, etc., etc. Somebody else says, when do you recommend getting a patent trademark? Well, patent and trademark are two quite different things. A patent means you've got a practical idea that can be demonstrated and you can get protection from anyone else copying that idea. Trademark simply says, I'm called IBM and nobody else can claim to be IBM except IBM, or I'm called Facebook or whatever. So you're protecting just the name. And as a little chuckle, I would tell you, I do a lot of business in China, and I was fascinated when I saw this little tea shop right beside where I was living, which was called Tea-Bucks, which is a nice way to steal the Starbucks concept. And so far, at least when I was there for some time, Starbucks didn't attack them. So the answer is trademark protection just means you're protecting the name. Somebody then said, do you recommend an actor make a business plan? Well, if you're an actor, you're in essence, you're a sole practitioner creative industry business. I know something about the entertainment industry and creative industries in various forms. I'm not an expert, but I would say that one of the challenges I find with many people from the creative industries in general is they don't think enough about what their value proposition is. They don't think enough about who the target customers should be. So I would say that I have done a fair bit of work with artists, that is painters, sculptors, and a few others. And one of the key issues there is, on the one hand, they're if you like, they're true creatives in the sense of they're the artists, but also if they wish to be financially successful, and they don't have to, then they should be thinking about, who am I going to sell this to, and why should they buy? So I would suggest that any creative industries professional needs to have an idea of what it is that they're bringing to offer, and if you'll allow me one slight side track with a close friend who's been a semi-professional actor for a long time. She happens to be quite small. She happens to be a great sword fighter. However, her voice is not the greatest, and frankly, she doesn't look as impressive as others might look doing sword fights on stage in a Shakespearean play. However, she turned that into becoming, in essence, a weapons master, and her work is teaching other people how to fight. So there's an example of taking your own value proposition and discovering the right thing to take to market. Okay, I've just covered all the rest of the questions. So any others, or do we call a halt?
No, I think that's good, Ken. I think everybody's asked their questions. We're looking good. So thank you so much for taking the time, and also for you being patient with all of this hoopla tonight.
Well, let me just finish by saying thank you all for being so tolerant. I mean, just to be clear, when I did test this all beforehand, but I think somehow the numbers that signed in, for whatever reason, kept knocking me off in terms of the sound or whatever else. I hope you get some value out of this. I would normally say my office is in Ted Rogers, and you can find me there anytime. But I would say quite genuinely, if you want to follow up, my contact information is easily accessible in Ryerson. You can always drop me an email. I'd be happy to give you more advice.
Perfect. Thank you so much, everybody. And we will see you all tomorrow, hopefully glitch-free. Thanks for tuning in, and high five all around to Digital Startup School and Ken Grant and everybody for coming. So have a great night, guys.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.